say go to you? I swear he was looking for you. Oh, he must have been.
I think we're good, Lauren.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Wendy, you tell me when. What's that? We're recording?
Oh, that's what it was. He probably went
Okay.
for you.
Welcome everybody this evening to our general planning commission meeting. Recognize all the guest presence. We appreciate you being here tonight. We do have I guess not a full quorum, but we do have a quorum. We're missing a few people this week due to vacations that time of year. But we will get started with a Pledge of Allegiance by James Horsley.
After me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wendy, do we need to start with a motion as temporary chair for right now, or did that happen in the previous meeting, or do we need to do that as well here? Okay. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to make Lauren our temporary chair.
I'll second.
All approved?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. As was mentioned, our chair and our vice chair are both absent tonight. We'll excuse them, as well as a couple of our other regular planning commissioners. So we'll have our three alternates sit tonight, Forrest, Daryl, and Heather, as well as myself, Brody, and Adam as regular commissioners. Go to item 3.3, any conflicts of interest for tonight on any of the agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 3.4, election of planning commission chair and vice chair. Open it to discussion. Any nominations for chair and vice chair for the upcoming year?
Brody, do you have any interest?
I don't at
Lauren?
this time.
I personally wouldn't mind keeping Chris.
Yeah, I feel strongly about, I think Chris
Chris
does a
and
great
Andrew,
job as the
I
chair.
think they've done a good job.
Okay.
That's just personal, though.
I'm good with that. I'd like to make a motion to have Chris be the chair and Andy be the alternate.
I'll second that.
Andy?
Andy again. Okay, do we do a roll call vote on that? Yes, okay, do a roll call vote. Adam,
Yes.
Daryl. Yes. Heather,
Yes.
Brody,
Yes.
Forrest,
Yes.
and I will vote yes on that as well. So that motion carries unanimous, 6. Second was
I was.
Brody.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. So if that being the case, do I just continue as
Yep.
temporary chair then? Okay. Okay. We didn't think that through, did we? But, okay, we appreciate their service, Chris and Andy. They've done a great job and look forward to having them continue in those roles. We will move on to item 4.1. There are a couple items on for public comment tonight, so I will read the policy and the procedure for public comment. The purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to Wendy Thorpe, Deputy Recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. This policy applies to all of our public hearings this evening. And those forms are in the back there if you didn't see them on your way in, if you'd like to make a public comment tonight. So, again, item 4.1, request for approval of a preliminary plat for Hidden Oaks Pod 2, Phase 1 with 24 single-family lots. And we will start with staff. Clinton.
Well, always good to be here. So this is a request from James Horsley with Riverside Development for the preliminary plat approval of Hidden Oaks Pod 2, Phase 1. This is 24 single-family lots in the Hidden Oaks MDA. So this is basically just an overview of the property, where the project is at. Last month, you'll remember that, or last meeting, we approved the Pod 1, Phase 2, just across the street from the proposed subdivision. And then the current subdivision was also slated in the MDA as a potential site for a charter school, but it did give options for residential units to take place as well, which is what is occurring now. So things we're looking at tonight in terms of consideration for compliance is the general plan and the Hidden Oaks MDA, along with engineering comments. There was a neighborhood meeting for this project, and it was held June 8th. There was no attendees, so there was no comments to really review with the commission at this time. We haven't received any emails or any phone calls as well for this project. Largely, that's probably likely because there's not a lot of residents around the property. I think we sent out 7 or 8 public notices, so just due to the lack of people around the areas, it's newly developing. In terms of consideration for the general plan, the area is shown as single-family, low-density residential. It also complies with the Hidden Oaks MDA. Pod 2 shows up in this blue area as an option for the charter school, but in the plan itself, it also provides an option for residential units. I want to say the maximum was 27 units, and they're proposing 24. So in terms of density, I don't know where the 63 lots are. Oh. So for pods 1 and 2, okay, so for pods 1 and 2, this, I think I've left some stuff out here. I'm trying to think now. Anyways, you can see down here on pod number 2, the charter school, where it allows for the 24 units without schools and churches. In terms of lot design, there aren't any standards for that were similar to the pod just across the street. But going through the individual lots, the minimum was 8,437 square feet, and an average of over 10,000 square feet per lot. And then the minimum width of the property of the individual lots were 68, and then a lot depth of 100 feet. So it exceeds the development to the east, just in terms of size and lot size and lot width as well. So. So there is one issue that we need to address in terms of correction and making sure that we address these issues at the time of subdivision. The first is along the right-of-way, along Hidden Oaks as well as Danzy Boulevard. There's a question of who owns that property, who maintains it, who installs. There was an email sent around today by the applicant stating that Ivory is potentially on the hook for that installation, but we also have some comments from Ivory saying that it's somebody else. So one of the conditions of approval is that needs to be resolved and determined exactly who will install and improve those landscaping areas before this subdivision is recorded. And then on the parcel A, that's going to be where their detention is being held for stormwater, and we just need an updated landscaping plan to show that that's in compliance with our water efficiency standards. In terms of fencing, there are a couple of inconsistencies in the plan. As shown here, the yellow line is proposed, from what I could tell with the plan, it's proposed to be an 8-foot wall, and then the remainder is a 6-foot wall. So staff's recommendation would be that the entire, wherever there's an 8-foot wall, basically turns into a 6-foot wall. And then this portion along this connector street, this portion here, we're recommending that stay without a fence to provide a little bit, so that open space is visible to the street, obviously. So that being said, with these recommendations of approval, we do find that this project is in compliance with the general plan and the Hidden Oaks MDA. These are the conditions of approval. There are a few, I think there are a few engineering review comments that still need to be addressed. Nothing that would change, you know, the shape or the functionality of the subdivision. Then again, addressing that right-of-way issue along Harriman Highway and Danzy Boulevard. The applicant's here, he can probably address that a little bit further. Maybe he has some better information than I'm presenting tonight. Updating the landscaping plan for parcel A, and then addressing the masonry fence. So are there any questions that I can address at this point?
Yeah, the Danzy Boulevard, if you go back one slide with the overview, is there a requirements to prohibit access from 104, 103, 101, 124, and 122 from if they wanted to have a second access off of that road? Do we need to put that in the requirements?
That's something I can look into. For a double frontage lot, I'm not exactly sure how that works.
Typically, it's only restricted unless we it's not restricted unless we put it on. So I was going to propose we probably should do that.
Yeah, that's something you could propose for sure.
Okay. That's all I had.
Any other questions for staff right now before we have the applicant come up? Okay, Clint, thank you. Okay, we invite the applicant up, Mr. Horsley.
James Horsley, Riverside Development. Planning Commission, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it. I'm hoping this one's a lot easier than the last one we did. No comments or anything. This is great. So just going over it. I mean, thank you, Clinton. Did a great job. Staff has been great going through this project. As you guys know, part of the Danzy, master plan development. So there wasn't too much that we were going to change to this or anything and stuff. We're staying with the 24 lots, even though we could have went to 27. We're fine with the 24 lots. On the open space there with Perry and Ivory and stuff. So the letter that got sent around today was actually from Kurt McConkey, the attorneys for Danzy's on the whole master plan thing. And so they're saying that it's Ivory because Ivory bought it back in 2018 is when Ivory bought it and stuff and owns it. So, but we'll take care of that. I mean, we're working with Perry on that Danzy Boulevard with our utilities in there and stuff and their utilities. So we'll work through that with them and make sure that it gets obviously taken care of. We want it to look nice up there. And they have something on their side too. So it'd probably be good to do something similar to whatever they do on their side of the road too. So, but besides that, I agree with what Adam said.
Do you have any issue with that if I put that as a requirement?
No, I agree with that. Yeah, that works great. So I agree with that. So besides that, any questions for me?
Any questions for the applicant? Nope. Okay, we'll give the opportunity to come back if there's any issues that are brought up in a public comment.
This is this easy? Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point then, we will open the public hearing on this item. Again, if you want to step forward and start with your name and. Okay, seeing no public comment on this item, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. I'll turn to the commission for any other comments.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't really have anything. So.
Yeah, staff's recommendations look solid.
Michael, I did have one question. What's the plan? Because this Danzy Boulevard connects into 134th. Is there a plan to widen 134th between? I know that's not necessarily the purview of this development. I'm just more concerned.
You know, Josh, on the street transportation master plan.
They'll have to do traffic models and stuff.
We could follow up with the commission on that.
Because where the other development's going in on by Holiday, they're supposed to widen that intersection. They're supposed to fix that intersection. So is it going to be down to 2 lanes and then no sidewalks and then open back up to?
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about it being a safety issue, safe walking route.
So over
I
time,
think this is going to.
over time on all of the properties along the 134th between 6,000 and 64, the city, as we've subdivided, the city has taken collections on some of those.
Right.
And since it is a capital capital facilities road, maybe later the city can come back and tell us when it'll be. But
Okay.
so with that, I would like to make a motion to approve item 4.1 with staff's 5 requirements and then an additional number 6 that lots 101, 103, 104, 124, and 122 have no egress on the Danzy Boulevard put on the plat.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Adam, second by Heather. Adam?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yeah.
Heather?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
And Forrest?
Yes.
That motion passes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Horsley. Appreciate you being here tonight. Move on to item 4.2, a request for an approval of a deviation from architectural standards for single-family home. We'll turn to staff.
Good evening. So this item I'm presenting, as you mentioned, the applicant's requesting a deviation of the single-family design standards. The property here is located in the Shoshone subdivision. It's a traditional subdivision, therefore they are required to meet city design standards. The deviation they're asking for is an exception to the 40% brick or stone requirement, which is a requirement of our design standards. The applicant initially submitted a building permit, and this house actually is almost completed in its construction. The application that was submitted, the applicant did show brick wainscoting on their home. Sometime during that build process, they decided to remove the brick as they built. It didn't suit the design of the home, and it was brought to our attention, I believe, by maybe an anonymous person called in and was concerned regarding the brick standard on this home. So after speaking with the applicant, they asked, they brought to our attention that they didn't feel that the brick met the style of this home and asked for, requested for a deviation. This is the current home as it sits now. As you can see, there's no brick and stone on there.
Can I make a comment real fast? I went by this home and it's actually painted white now.
Is it painted white now?
So it looks a little different. It looks more farmhousey.
Yeah, and the applicant drew a pretty good picture of what they wanted to see here.
Yeah.
And this picture is probably about 3 days old, I think. So, so what the applicant is proposing, and what they feel is as a compensating feature for that reduction, was the addition of the front porch that runs the extent of the front entryway, the eyebrow above the window, above the garage door, and some decorative wood accents on the home. There's also a wood dormer across the top. They are actually providing hardy board siding on all 4 sides of the home. And I guess I'll bring this up as well. It was in the staff report and a discussion you guys had last night during your work meeting. As you guys are aware, the state legislation passed a bill stating that the cities can no longer mandate design standards as far as building materials go. This application was submitted prior to that legislation bill that was passed, and therefore we're just doing this as a formality. But the staff has found that the architecture features that the homeowner has provided, we feel those are compensating, and we would recommend approval of the deviation of the design standard. If you have any questions for me, the applicant is here as well.
Okay. Appreciate it, Sheldon. Thank you. Okay, I'd like the applicant to come forward at this point. If you wouldn't mind just stating your names for the record.
Hello, Melissa Clark.
And Kevin Clark.
Thank you so much. Like he said, we kind of deviated from our plans and really wanted to go with this beautiful hardy board white. Like you said, we just painted it this weekend. And it's our dream home. And we're hoping to make it beautiful. And we think it's beautiful. And we're just hoping that we can get approval for this because we know we deviated a bit.
We're not trying to get away with anything. At the beginning, we worked with a planner who, obviously, what we had was less than 40%. And what we were told with that planner, which I believe is no longer with the city, is that as long as it looks good, we're good, right? And that's why it was approved originally. And then we were also told by a city inspector that we could get away without stone. And I mean, we've just
So we made the risk.
we took the risk.
took
We
the
drove through some of the newer neighborhoods. We see a lot of houses without stone. It's like, oh, we can get away with it. So,
Yeah.
but we want to do it the right way and get approval. So,
Yeah. So.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I don't have any.
So what are you planning on putting on the foundation?
You know, technically, it's going to be covered by landscape. We thought about putting brick or stone, but really, it will be covered.
And it's not gonna add a lot. So right now,
Yeah.
the plan is to plaster the foundation.
Part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I think based on the fact that the code's changed by the state statute, I think we're pretty much stuck, so I don't see an issue whatsoever.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, the compensating factors as well.
Yeah, definitely, we, for the first time, actually do have compensating factors.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
pointing those out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Thank you.
So I'd
Okay,
like,
then
I'd
I
like
would-
to make a motion to approve item 4.2. I don't think there's anything to
I'll
really
second
discuss on
that.
it.
Okay, motion by Adam, second by Brody. Adam?
Yes.
Darrell?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
And Forrest?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you for being here. Okay, we'll move on to our legislative items tonight. A couple public hearings as well. Start with item 5.1. Again, these will be recommendations to the city council. Item 5.1, recommendation of approval to amend 10-16 of the city ordinance to allow personal care services as a conditional use in the R215 zone. Clint?
Okay. So this request came before us. This is in the Soleil Lofts development that's close to completion. So during the process, I think that the applicant was under the understanding that this was approved all along. We had a request for a tanning salon in the clubhouse that would be open to the public as well, not just as an amenity to the residents there. And that's kind of raised the issue. We'd let them know that we couldn't approve that because it's not approvable in the ordinance. So this is their approach is to come to the city and request this amendment to allow that type of use to take place in their development and provide some restrictions on where it can take place. So again, this is the R215 zone. R215 zone comprises about 400 acres. But as I'll get into it a little bit more, it's much less than that. The impact will be much less than that. We're looking at, again, the general plan and the zoning ordinance in terms of consideration for compliance. So the proposal is to allow a personal service business in the R215 zone. The applicant's proposing it be a conditional use on property that's greater than 25 acres, with the hours of operation being from 8 to 10. Personal care services as defined by the city include, the bolded items here: barbershops, beauty salons, portrait studios, of course, tanning and nail salons, weight loss centers, etc. So those are the types of uses that we're considering. The applicant restricted the use to the R215 zone. Again, that was over 400 acres, but really when it comes down to it, the way that it's proposed and the way that staff has made some changes to the proposal, it would apply to Soleil Lofts, highlighted in yellow, and then the Havendale just to the south of it, which is also, so with staff's recommendations, the acreage changes from 25 to 15, and maybe I'll explain that here in a second a little bit better. In terms of general plan compliance, this does encourage the retention of existing businesses and attracts new businesses. Just provides more locations for businesses to locate in the city. In terms of zoning compliance, we're looking at, is it harmonious with surrounding character? In terms of where these types of uses are going, it's multifamily development. Having a few extra car trips a day for a tanning salon or something along these personal care services probably is going to be widely unnoticed. Typically, they're overparked, so they are providing additional parking for the use. In terms of adversely affecting neighbors, I think I kind of addressed that with the traffic concerns. As the applicant proposed it, so this was their language, is multifamily residential where personal care services is located must have an area of 25 acres. And then as we looked at that, so staff's modification limits to where that can take place, so it's not something that every resident in the development can.
Not in their homes.
Yeah, do it out of their homes, but this restricts it to a clubhouse or attached to a main office. So it's a central location, and then again goes down to 15 acres, which still provides an area large enough to accommodate additional parking for these types of uses. That being said, we do recommend approval for this, finding that the proposed changes are in compliance with the general plan and the current zoning ordinance. Any questions from me on that?
I don't have any.
Questions for staff? Okay.
Okay.
We're okay. Okay, is the applicant here this evening? Again, if you could just state your name for the record tonight, we would appreciate it.
Good evening. James Johnson. I'm a regional manager with Wasatch Property Management. And Gracia Mangrum, who is our manager of Soleil Loss. Correct, when we kicked off this project, we actually had a third story on the clubhouse originally. I think it was around 50,000 square feet. We ended up eliminating the third floor, which was initially designed and approved to be an event center. Naturally, that event center would have brought in the public catering, and we would have done a variety of different things there. Ultimately, that was eliminated, but within our amenity set, which includes the indoor-outdoor pools, spas, large clubhouse, 4,500 square foot gym, theater, bunch of fun stuff. Come over and say hi. But within that, we had this section to do the spa, which we wanted to do, which was kind of in tandem with the event center, but we had moved forward on it. Have actually previously done one in northern Utah that was specific to residents only, but have an individual who wants to not just be able to provide services to the 600 units there at Soleil, but also open it up to the public, which we were excited about and wanted to do, and then came across this issue. So, yeah, are happy to work through it and answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for the applicant?
I don't.
Okay,
I don't.
we might have you come back up if there's issues in the public hearing, but.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, we will open up this item now for public comment, for public hearing. Okay, anything, Wendy? No comments online or anything? Okay. Okay, at this point then, we will close the public hearing on this item, and I'll turn to the commission for any comments.
I really liked how we tied it to the clubhouse. I think that makes total sense, so that was all I was gonna say.
I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like with these densities that they have, I like that they have these amenities that they can bring into it. So for me, I think it's a positive.
I don't know, Adam. I think that just opening this up to the areas that were highlighted, I think it would be a good idea. I mean, it's like a barbershop or like an in-home salon, right?
It just becomes a parking issue. That I hear you, but we've had that. And
But
then
when you have these little shops that has one person coming in at a time, I don't think, and it's generally going to be during business hours, I don't think it's going to be an issue.
yeah,
If they were like work-live units, I think I'd be.
yeah, I would be. That's kind of how I am.
That's why I almost wonder if that's kind of where I'm like thinking when we do something of this density in these places, like
So I was pretty.
work-live makes a lot of sense.
I was pretty adamant about daycares not being part of it, so that kind of made me feel like we should include this too. But I like that this is tied to more of a regional hub, so I like how staff has recommended that addition. I hear what you're saying, and
Yeah.
you know, if someone is doing it on their own at their house, that's different than a true business. So that to me is where it is a little bit different. So, but good point. So you just like to, how would you propose changing it then, Heather?
I mean, I just don't want to restrict it to the clubhouse. I think that our zone would be fine to have it in that area. I think that just those uses are just, I mean, obviously someone's not going to have a tanning salon in their apartment or condo, right?
You don't know that.
But
Well,
Okay,
That's my
okay.
concern. That's my concern with.
Okay, I see your
is
concern
that
now.
what you're thinking,
Well-
to extend it to residences?
You know, the fact that this is asking it to be conditional,
Yeah.
you'd have to get approval for it, and then you can come back later and say,
That's not our intent.
that's not our intent,
Yeah.
you know, we want you to, you know, have it in a separate building or whatever, or attached to,
Yeah,
you know, an amenity.
that's why I like it tied to the amenity, because then we don't have to, if someone got a 3-bedroom apartment
And
or
uses one of their rooms
condo,
for their tanning salon.
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Or two of those rooms, I think it changes the feel of
Okay,
that
I
community.
see what you're saying.
But I hear what you're saying. I like to try and open it up more as well, but I just think in this case, it could be detrimental if we don't tie it to the.
Yeah.
the
I
center.
like the idea of providing the amenities in the neighborhood, in the development. It'll create I think, a better feel, and we've been talking about this for quite a while now, of creating a sense of community. I think this will help with that. With new developments, I mean, if these folks meet with success, other developments will do that. And during their development phase, we can incorporate, make sure that the parking issues are addressed, all the ingress, egress issues are addressed. So I'm in favor of it.
Are you for the restriction, though, just to that clubhouse, or?
Daryl, he's asking, are you in favor of it with the restriction or without the restriction?
With the restrictions, sorry, Heather, I don't like them in the residence.
It's okay, I understand.
As soon as I
could see
threw
a hair salon, but when you point out the tanning salon, it does get a little weird.
it
so,
could be a little
yeah.
odd, or massage part. It
Yeah.
could change it kind of
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
I feel comfortable with how it is. I think I'm just thinking like down the road where I like these denser communities to have those amenities within their development. It's nice.
So.
Okay, should we make a motion then? Accept the motion.
Yeah, I just can't remember how the wording was. Can somebody kick it back up so we can see it? Sorry. Good thing I didn't start early. I was gonna say I'd like to make a motion really slow, but but apparently not.
Let's read it off that.
Anybody else?
Well,
have that?
staff edited it, so I just want to make sure we include their edits. I really liked how they put it. Perfect.
Right there.
Right there. I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval to City Council for item 5.1 with staff's recommended changes.
Motion by Adam. Have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Forrest. We'll take a vote. Forrest?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Adam?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.2, request for the recommendation of approval to amend 10-29 regarding provisions for use of shipping containers. Turn to staff, Michael.
Thank you. I know this is largely a repeat presentation. We had a public hearing on this last month, and this is on again for another public hearing. So again, we started this conversation as a community because some of our residents have been approaching the city wanting to reuse these shipping containers. This is an issue that's been impacting communities across the country, but primarily coastal communities, because we are receiving more goods through these shipping containers into our country than we are exporting. So these containers are coming to our shores. People are looking for creative ways to reuse them. They come in a variety of sizes, and they generally are thought of as kind of like for storage. That's how we typically are seeing people requesting permission to use them in the city. Ideally, if we were to allow them, we would want to have regulations that would require that they're clean, they're rust-free, they're painted, they're at least in good repair. We've seen people, not locally, but on the internet, you can find creative reuse of these structures. Here we have the container swimming pool. Some people have been converting them to even some type of living space or even a full-on accessory dwelling unit. We have seen with the pandemic, people looking for additional spaces where they can work from home or have craft shops and different things. We're finding a lot of creativity in how people are using their homes and their properties these days, especially recently given the pandemic. We talked about whether or not in reusing these structures, would we want to have some compatibility with the residential property. As we talked about already, there are forthcoming changes being required by the state that limit cities' abilities to regulate basic design of a single-family structure. It doesn't limit our ability to regulate design when it comes to an accessory structure. Our accessory structure regulations currently simply say that we need to have compatible materials and color as the principal structure on the property. So in re-listening to our conversation following the public hearing the last time we visited this issue, I identified in the staff report what I thought were kind of key comments from the commission members. And I amended the draft ordinance to try and respond to those comments. So in summary, I basically heard three key issues. One was dealing with architectural compatibility. Do we want to require some level of compatibility, or are we thinking that perhaps just simply a cleaned, well-maintained, painted, neutral color container would be acceptable if we were to even allow this at all? And again, this is a recommendation by this body to the City Council. And also to clarify, our current ordinance doesn't say you can't reuse these metal containers. It's that if they're visible from the street, we do require that it has this architectural compatibility. And if that includes putting on a matching roof line, for example, if you have to build a pitched roof on top of one of these metal containers, the attraction for purchasing and trying to reuse one of these shipping containers really diminishes. The idea is that these are structurally sound and they are watertight. They don't need this additional kind of skin or structure on top of them to make them be effective. I also shared with the Planning Commission previously that our own building official was very skeptical when she attended training on the potential reuse of these structures in a community. And she left being very convinced that this can be done very safely and effectively. So we're really thinking about, is this more a representation of our values as a community? We can allow these currently, but again, it requires this reskinning essentially of these structures. So as people have been approaching us, the question is, what do we want to do? Do we still want to require that architectural compatibility? Do we kind of diminish their attraction for reuse? Or do we come up with maybe some more flexibility or more options as to how these can be used? Another issue was talking about the limiting commercial use. And Adam, you're the one who really mentioned this, and I thought about how I think you're correct in that this could potentially be really abused by folks who are kind of using their homes as a way station. Maybe they don't run a business from their home per se, but they're storing maybe construction materials or other kind of business-related items. Currently, under our home occupation ordinances, we generally don't allow you to use an accessory structure for a home-based business. So like even storing materials is not presently allowed. And this ordinance would not change that standard. And so we actually, in one of the footnotes in the draft ordinance, we restated that it's our proposal, the draft proposal, that you could not use reuse the metal container for commercial interest, essentially. So some of the other changes that we made, and I'm going to move to this. We talked about, do we want to allow these as a permitted use in the city potentially, or a conditional use? This was my first effort at responding to the commission. There was discussion about allowing them as a conditional use when we have living space, not a full-on dwelling unit, but using it for some kind of occupiable space. That would be a conditional use in our residential and agricultural zones. If it's being used for strictly storage, again, in the agricultural and residential uses, we're still thinking conditional. And the thinking there is, if the ordinance works well, we have done this on some of the other conditional uses in our city where the commission authorizes staff with certain procedural standards that we could potentially administratively review a conditional use request for these types of applications. If it becomes fairly routine, we could also revisit this classification and maybe switch it to a permitted use. So it's really a by right development where someone will come in and just simply get a building permit and not do a specific land use review for the project. So shipping containers, when used for an agricultural purpose, pure agricultural purpose, that would be a permitted use. But we did include a footnote on the draft that says that it has to be a minimum of 1 acre, and it has to be for a bona fide agricultural purpose. So it's really is being used as some type of a shed or a structure for some kind of agricultural operation. And I know we don't have very many of those still in our community, but that was the thinking that I had put into this draft based on our conversation in the past. Commercial use of a shipping container, again, that's a permitted use restricted to commercial zones. Did not include it in the mixed use zone. That wasn't something that really came up in our conversation last time. And I thought perhaps that was a little more consistent with where I think we probably would likely see these being reused potentially. And that would be a permitted use, but it still would require a site plan review, and all of these would require a building permit review. Temporary use, I've listed that in all of the zones, and in the footnote, we're describing that really as it says requires site plan approval by city planner or designee. Temporary use shall be limited to 30 days or for the duration of a construction project by a bona fide licensed contractor. Upon termination of approved use, the shipping container shall be removed from the property within 60 days. Now, you can certainly expand that. That's how I was thinking that these would be used temporarily. We are seeing these pop up on job sites for storage of equipment and materials. So maybe we could have a little better handle on this, or maybe that's even overstated. Maybe we really don't need to worry about these as a temporary use in our community, but that was an option that was in the draft. Another thing that I had identified but did not actually put into the draft, I stated in the staff report that I had wondered if somebody was using a shipping container for storage only in our agriculture and our conditional use, or excuse me, agricultural and residential zones, if that shipping container was 200 square feet or less, might we not require architectural compatibility? Could it be just simply clean, painted, free from rust, properly placed on the property? But that didn't seem to resonate in our last conversation. We seem to be pushing more for architectural compatibility of these structures. So I did not include that in the ordinance, but that was one thing I did mention in the staff report. Might we have an exception for smaller reuse of smaller containers? Another thing I wanted to point out to you in the draft was item number 5. I contacted a company who not only uses shipping containers, but they actually build new ones. And I wasn't really aware of that. And I asked them, well, what sizes are you building and shipping? Previously, we had described a metal shipping container not exceeding 10 by 10 by, I'm drawing a blank, was it 40? Yeah. And I asked them, well, what do you ship? And they said maximum length that we can use to ship these on our roads and freeways is this 42-foot length, 32.5 feet, or 13.5 feet wide by 10 feet tall. So I adjusted that language based on this feedback that I received, but we could go back to the 10 by 10 by 40 if that is a preference of the commission as a recommendation to the city council. So again, that was the number of changes. This whole land use table was new. We did not have this last time. All of the footnotes that are associated that kind of control or modify how these permits are actually, or land uses are actually used and regulated in the city. Any questions before we open this up for a public hearing and see if there's any public comment on this at this time?
I'll wait for the questions I have.
Right,
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
you bet. And I don't know how to clear the red there. All right.
I know, you're driving me nuts with that red thing.
Can we do it?
I wish we could do it.
We can.
Well, on your camera.
On mine, yeah, it's like every.
Oh, wow, it's gone.
every
Apparently,
other.
that's the seat I need to sit in
You
from
do.
now on.
We need to do a training.
Wait, did you hear that? I need to sit.
Can we
on
do a
that seat
training
from
on
now
this? next time.
We know I would touch it.
Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing on this item. Seeing none, anything online? Wendy has one online.
The microphone working?
The comment received from Jonathan Titus states, "I object to the use of shipping containers for non-shipping purposes and strongly believe the use of such containers is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the general plan. Shipping containers are built for shipping. They are not built for reuse as office space, a craft room, workshop storage, or other non-shipping purposes in residential areas. Prohibition without exception should apply to zones A1/4, A1/2, R115, R110, R210, and MU2. I have specific concerns about sections of your document, Harriman City Code Title 10 Land Use Development, Chapter 29 Supplementary and Qualifying Regulations, 1029-33 Reuse of Metal Shipping Container as Accessory Structure. Section B states temporary use except as otherwise provided. Metal shipping containers shall be allowed in all zones as a temporary use during construction, grading operations, or agricultural operations when utilized solely to store supplies and equipment used for the construction, grading, or agricultural operations on that site." Who defines temporary? In these cases, I recommend a maximum use of 6 months with possible extension of an additional 3 months during residential construction. No renewals. That provides clear limits for the possible non-habitation uses. Construction projects, property grading, and agricultural operations should not require more than a 9-month span. 1029-33, Section E7 states a principal building, dwelling unit, or agricultural operation shall be located on the lot. Does phrase "shall be" mean the property owner must have a principal building, dwelling unit, or agricultural operation at the time a person places a shipping container? Or does it mean at some future time that the owner must meet these requirements? What about the size of a principal building? Could it be a 2-car garage, a farm shed, or a shack? What is a dwelling unit? This section begs for clear specifications. Perhaps a glossary of terms would clarify what you mean. 1029-33, Section E10, metal shipping containers shall be rust-free and painted a neutral earth tone color or a color consistent with principal building or dwelling unit. If this section remains in a final plan, any shipping container on the property of a residence must have the same exterior finish as the residence, and the residence owner must maintain that condition for as long as the owner possesses the property. The exterior work must occur and finish within the first 30 days of the container's placement on a property. This ordinance, should it move from the Planning Commission to Town Council, must stipulate that container use of any kind excludes storage of vehicle fuels and lubricants, propane, or any other gaseous materials, such as propane, oxygen, acetylene, butane, and others, explosives, and fireworks. The U.S. Postal Service provides guidance about hazardous materials on their website link. Finally, any storage container of any type in Harriman must remain locked. That should be part of our rules and regulations now. In its original condition, a container's door mechanism makes it easy for someone to mistakenly lock in a child or pet. And that's the end of the comment.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, at this point then, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and turn to the commission for any comments, questions, discussion.
So, I actually like as long as they fit the nature of the home that they're, I actually see no problem with the accessory building, as long as it looks like the house, at least the colors and scheme. If it's just painted and it looks like a bright red storage unit, then I think we have a problem. So Mike, I'm good with that. The one thing I was gonna talk about is with your table, I think we actually need to maybe talk about some of the commercials as possibly being more like a conditional use, or as well as even including it in the MU. Like, I'll be honest, there's one right in front of the city hall, and it's bright blue. So we probably want to put at least a conditional use on that so we could officially approve it and accept it. And I actually see that being longer term food truck-like businesses, and I think that's a good thing. But I think we should possibly have those be conditional uses and really talk about, does it fit the need of that community? Especially when you look at like the fireworks ones. Those take up a huge amount. They look a little unsightly. And so I actually don't really, I think we need to regulate those a little bit more to make it more fit in with the environment since they're here for a period of time. So I think maybe turning those to conditionals would be more advantageous for the city as a whole. But as far as the storing side, I think just trying to, and I don't know if the language says it right now enough to beef it up to say, and I agree with when you say we don't need to have a roof on top. I'm not saying that. And that's why I'm not really comfortable pushing it to council just yet, but I think we just need to come up with, like that one.
Right.
Awesome, no problem. And I know they're using it as more of a living room space, but I'll be honest, I don't think we don't prohibit people doing that now as a living room space outside. But I actually think something like that would promote this type of use makes sense to me. But it's when it's just a painted metal object that I think we need to get somewhere between painted metal and this. And that's, I think, that's the only thing I think it's missing, as well as maybe some more C's on the commercial. So just so we can talk about it and make sure we've thought about parking and things like that.
And as you know, I've said in the very beginning, I have no idea what the values of this community are on this topic. And this one public comment that we received tonight, I am really grateful for. I think we heard some good comments. I would love to look at that and think about what changes maybe should be made to this draft, in addition to the comments that Commissioner Jacobson just shared. So I'm happy to take that direction.
And those are my only two recommendations that I would say, and let you think about what maybe some permitteds would make sense. I do like the point about tying the temporary construction ones even a little bit more on a reviewing occurrence. I think that does make sense. And I think some of our businesses, after we pointed this out last time, it was funny, I walked out, saw the blue one, and then I've been driving around and you see them behind commercial buildings, and I think that's not the intent of it either, is you should have built your store big enough to store said material, not use shipping containers to offset that.
And like the one here, I was thinking in my mind that would be a temporary use, and I did list it as a permitted temporary use here in the MU2, or that's what this is zoned. But yes, I think we could certainly change those to conditional and extend that into the MU2 zone.
Yeah, because I think you bring up a good point. Let's say they have X amount of parking spaces, and then they go drop one of these on their parking lot, right? It's like, well, then now you're below your parking standard because you took up 5 or 6 stalls.
Well, and we've seen that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some of our office buildings are barely close enough to hitting their parking quotas. And then if you took any of that out with this for just even a small little coffee shop, I've seen these as coffee shops, and I think that's a good thing for the community.
Yeah.
But I think we should just review them and make sure that it's not taking away from the parking overall.
But then, like you said, like an incubator, like where we're going from the food trucks to, giving somebody the opportunity to have a small store. If they put some unique, I guess, skin around it makes it look nice. But it's tricky finding a balance between that. That's where I'm struggling.
Okay.
So I've kind of waffled on this one. But initially I was against it, then I was for it, and now I'm waffling again. I don't know how I feel about having this in our residential areas. I think that something that was kind of mentioned in the public comment is it does take away from the community feel. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not ready to have these as a permitted use in residential.
Well, I think the height restriction, I would like to keep it at 10 feet. I think it was 13 and a half.
That was a width.
Wide.
That
Wide.
wide, 10 feet tall?
Right.
Okay.
I guess I'm seeing a couple things too. It would be a given that they're tied to the development code. So in the case of the picture you're showing, let's presume it has a bathroom facility in it. So it'd go through all the checks and balances for code approval. I didn't read in your list whether hazardous materials are prohibited or not. I get it for the 4th of July trailers, which I agree with Adam. They need to be dressed up a little bit better. But if you're going to apply this to a residence, I don't want hazardous materials stored in there.
But if we have the ability to regulate that now, and I would have to look at our building code, I'm assuming that's already protected, right? Just because we're introducing a metal container doesn't suddenly change whether or not our residents have the permission or not to store hazardous materials.
Right, but
Ancillary buildings
it
don't
looks like
have
a
that
boxcar, and they can dress it up. I don't personally know how many of these will be employed. It seems to be kind of cost prohibitive by the time you shipped this in and do all the prep work to take care of it, to make it presentable, put it on a foundation. You might as well go to Home Depot and buy some 2x4s, but.
Depends if lumber prices stay high.
Before this
Of
month.
course, yeah, never mind that, of course. But this picture here is wonderful, but I don't know how many people will actually do that.
True, and we shared this one, and there was some concern that, well, we don't think we want to just allow just strictly metal. So, that we are now talking more about, if it's visible, then you'd probably have to do something to make
kind
it
of
compatible
cladding.
with the home.
And Michael, the other reason why I think commercial we really need to look at, and every time I drive by 90th South and State Street, the corner that has been a perpetual Christmas tree or fireworks station since I was 5 years old, and it's a prime commercial corner, is what I am concerned with if we don't do it in a conditional use fashion.
Perpetual.
I guess my bottom line preference is I like conditional use applied to these on commercial, but I don't know if I'm a big fan of them in residential.
So this all started because we're getting calls. People want to do them. And we had one specifically who had one and was subject to code enforcement. And our council said, let's study this and let's see what we want to do. Again, you can use them, but you have to reskin them essentially if it's visible.
And I think we should look into what would look good for residential. Like you said, this looks good. Maybe we put in the standard there to give people an option. It might not be cost prohibitive, but we don't look at that, unfortunately.
Perhaps if you do use them, at least tie it to the architecture of the existing home.
Yeah. Colors and materials, right?
Yeah.
Michael, was the phone call from a resident in an agricultural zone? If I remember right, Sherry said it was in an agricultural zone.
I'm not sure, but I know that staff just takes random phone calls. Can you do this? What's the regulations? And then we tell them yes, you can use it, but you have to make it compatible with your home. And then usually they lose a lot of interest because if there is a efficiency in reusing them, then that quickly disappears, especially if you have to put some kind of a roof structure on it.
And I'm kind of torn because like someone that's on an acre, 2 acres, they have one of these, and sometimes just you can't even see them because they have trees and other things, and then others where there's no trees, landscaping, anything, it's like, you know, you can clearly see the shipping container. And it's not that it bothers me if they have that much land. I kind of feel like that's their right to store what they want on their property. But when it gets into tighter footprints, that's where I would like to see something that has
Well, and
something more compatible.
that was one of the, yeah, you said you wanted it on a minimum of 10,000 square foot.
Yep.
And I put that, I tied that to shipping container for storage only. Oh, and same footnote 3. Also, so if you're doing shipping container for living space, again, on a 10,000 square foot lot or larger, so you can't do it on a smaller lot,
Okay.
under this draft.
So it
That
sounds
was-
like,
That was what you all had told me to do.
sounds like you're comfortable taking the comments.
Oh, yes,
as well as
absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
I think we just
So
need
if
to
the
talk
commission's
about,
not ready, yeah.
about
Appetite to continue it then?
continuing it and letting staff look at both the comments. A lot of those were very valid and they were very code referenced, so I think it'd be good for us to dig through those.
Good.
As well as look at what skin solutions make sense and what don't.
Yeah, and I would also like to see bad examples.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing all the good ones, which we're like, oh, that looks awesome.
I have a
But
few.
like, what are, you know, what are
There
some
you go.
bad?
There you go.
I will say, I don't think we should worry about the roof, because I agree, it has a roof. There's no reason, that to
agree
me
there,
is
yeah.
too far stretched.
Yeah.
Other than making sure it's not, unsightly from some elevations kind of thing, painted or something, but.
They can put rocks on top.
Okay, sounds like we'll take a motion then at this point.
I move to continue item 5.2 without date.
Motion by Adam,
I'll second that.
second by Brody. Adam?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
And Forrest?
Yes.
Okay, that motion will continue. We'll continue that item without date.
Your patience and fortitude is impressive. So, okay.
We're good at that. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.3, recommendation of approval to amend item 10-29-5 pertaining to regulations for accessory structures. We'll start with Clint.
All right. I kind of feel like sometimes these planning commission meetings are death by PowerPoint, but hang in there. Last one. Okay, so this is something that we've been looking at for quite some time. Looking at old applications, this is something that I think that has gone back a few years even. But there's been an appetite from the city to kind of consolidate and update the accessory building or accessory structure ordinance for the city. And so that's what we've tried to do in this most recent proposal. So the objectives of this proposal are to consolidate accessory building standards in one location and then make any necessary updates and modifications to that as needed. So again, we're looking at compliance with the general plan and zoning ordinance in terms of compliance. So with the proposed, and this is chapter 33, not 31, it would be, 31 is already on the books, so this would be proposed chapter 33. And the purpose of this standard would be to establish uniform regulations for accessory buildings or accessory structures within the city. These requirements are intended to ensure that accessory structures are compatible with the character of the neighborhood and do not unduly disturb or impact adjacent property owners. So that's, with that framework in mind, that's kind of the backbone for this proposal. So in terms of regulation, we're looking at areas of, we're looking at regulating location, the height, architectural standards, different standards for ag zones, and then a development standard table, which simplifies life for a planner when you're looking at where these are applicable and what ordinances are in place. One of the things that we're introducing with this as well is special exceptions, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but special exceptions would work similar to a conditional use where somebody maybe they have a unique situation or unique way that their property lays out, that exceeding the regulations would make sense and wouldn't be impactful, but it gives them an opportunity to at least come before the commission to look at that. And then again, amending some definitions as well. So in the ordinance, these are the standards for location. 6 feet from the main building, We looked at that just in terms of, I think, just in terms of fire code. When I talked to our building officials, that seemed to be something that they said would be helpful and beneficial to them. 3 feet from property line, I know there was some comment to have them move closer to property line, but again, there's some fire restrictions that make sense. There is an exception if it's smaller than 80 square feet and 8 feet in height, it can be set back at 1 feet from the side property line. Typically as well, on a lot of these, a lot of the residential neighborhoods, they'll have an easement around the entire property. Most of the time, those easements are about 5 feet for public utilities. So they wouldn't be placed, if it's over 200 square feet, it wouldn't be able to be placed on those locations anyways. So we feel that leaving it at 3 feet would be recommended. In terms of setback, this is applying to the side. So same setback as the dwelling when street facing on the side setbacks. And then 10 feet from an adjacent dwelling, and I think in the ordinance it specifies even further. So if you have an accessory building on this side of the property, and there's a residential home on the other side, if it's a garage, it can be closer than 10 feet, but if it's actual living space, then it needs to be a minimum of 10 feet. Not in the front yard, and then side yard setbacks to be maintained between so if it's placed in the side yard, then it needs to maintain that same side yard setback to as a home would. So it's going to be 8 or 10 feet or whatever the underlying zone requires. So in terms of height and height, area, and lot coverage, so for lots less than 16 or lots less than half an acre, it's 16 feet currently. We felt that standard should probably continue on unless the commission sees any reason that standard should change. There's a maximum 800 square foot total, which is also something that's currently in place that we feel that it is appropriate to maintain through, at this point anyways. You can't have more than 25% of the rear or side yard, and then the structure can't be more than the footprint of the home. When you get into the more than half acre, the provision of height goes up to 20 feet as a maximum, and then there are some additional regulations for ag zones, which we'll touch on as well. In terms of architectural standards for anything over 200...
Back real quick, I just wanted to make sure I read that right. I was going to ask you a question. Go back one slide, if you wouldn't mind. So it still has to be less than the footprint of the home, even in greater than half an acre?
Yes.
Because that's something that I think we might want to consider is in some agriculturals, if you put an arena, your house will never be the size of an arena. And we have that in I know we have several arenas in our ag areas.
Yeah. I don't know
the
if it's
homes are
like
like 2,000 square feet, and the barns are like 50 by 500. They're huge.
Well, and those are the people that don't care. They don't care if their house
I
is
get
smaller
in
than
less than half an acre.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm talking on larger. I don't think we should care.
And I think that when you get into when it's an agricultural use, I think it allows that structure to be larger than a home.
Okay.
That's for a specific, so it's an ag zone with an ag use, then it can be larger. If it's strictly a residential zone, then it's less than the footprint of the home. But I'll look at that and make sure that that's actually the case.
Okay.
Okay, so for 200 square feet more, compatible with the main dwelling in terms of color, roof lines, and material. Maintain in good condition, weed-free around the surrounding of the property, which also we felt like maintaining that 3 foot setback distance would help to keep the weeds down, makes it easier to get back there. So the agricultural standards, when the primary function of the building is for an agricultural use, then you can go up to a maximum height of 35 feet. You can also, so anything over 20 feet high requires a 10-foot minimum setback. We looked at agricultural uses for animals and other locations or other any cities, surrounding cities. 40 feet is actually less than the other cities require. Like we looked at Harriman, South Jordan, and Riverton, and Lehigh. And so 40 feet was again, less than those other cities would require in terms of distance from a structure that housed animals to a residential home. And then having the exterior compatible with the use as much as possible, and then with the domain dwelling as well. So probably the biggest change is just in terms of special exceptions. The conditions for the exception would include the use, construction, operation, character, location, screening, and landscaping. The process for this would be that if somebody felt like they had a condition that would apply to it, or they wanted to apply for a special exception, that would come before the community development director for approval. If they felt like it was something that needed before the commission, they could recommend that to come before the commission. And again, these special exceptions are very similar to the conditional use standards. We'd be looking at general impact or general plan impacts, CCNRs, effect of the character of the block pattern, adverse effect on health, safety, and welfare. Additional height may be possible with additional setbacks, impacts on adjacent properties, visibility, triangle compatibility, and other requirements and mitigations as necessary. As part of the special exception, when it came before the Planning Commission, the adjoining neighbors of that property would also be notified, so they could come to the meeting and voice concern if they had any. So we feel like with the revisions that we've made here, it is compatible with the general plan and the current zoning standards, and recommend approval, but we are open for revision. So that being said, if there's any questions I can help clarify, I'd be glad to.
Questions for staff at this point?
We have a lot of people here, so I'm going to wait for that.
Well, thank you for combining them all together. That's helpful.
Yeah. Consolidating, that's helpful for us as well,
Yeah.
as a staff to review things. We don't have to chase 20 different codes.
Yeah.
Try to figure it out.
Okay, well, at this point, this item is on for a public hearing tonight. So at this point, we will go ahead and open the public hearing.
My name's Kirk Sedgwick. I've been dealing with Clint, and he was telling me about this planning change and recommended I come in here and talk to you guys and show you what an exception might look like. So this started back in February. I started looking for a building to put on my property. I've located one. I found one that was a great deal. So I went forth with calling in to the building department. Asked all the questions about it. Several of them, 3 of them that we're having a problem with. The height requirement, I think we might have that figured out from the slope on my land, but when I asked about that, they told me that if there was some kind of an anomaly on my land, we could make adjustment for that. The other thing is the size. They said I was allowed to do 25%. I talked to him, I says, this building that I found, it's a little bigger than that. Was there gonna be an issue? And the exact return I got was, we're building houses on 1/8 of an acre here in Harriman. I don't see that as being a problem. The other one that I got was, it's gotta be like the house. And I says, what's like? Color. Okay, great. So we had a 14-minute discussion about this. I called in on March 2nd, left a message. They called me back at 4:02 p.m. We discussed all this stuff. So after we got that hashed out, I went ahead with the building. It's a pre-constructed building, so you have to buy that up front, and then they engineer it and on and on and on. So I went ahead and purchased that building, $50,000. Then I got my engineered drawings. I went to a local engineer, got my foundation and everything engineered, turned in for a building permit, and now I'm being told you can't have that building for those reasons. When it comes down to, I just today went out and physically measured my yard. Now, my yard is surrounded with fences that have been there for greater than 10 years. I physically measured my backyard. This building ends up 2.2% over the 25. The other thing is with the slope, I think we figured that out because my yard slopes quite a lot. We go with the average, we'll get the building's 20 feet tall. Now, the thing about that, with impact on neighbors and things like that, my neighbor behind me and both sides have told me they're excited to see it go up. But the way my land goes, it goes like this, and then it starts going up and up and up and up. And the finished grade of the people behind me, their lawn is gonna be taller than this building. The neighbor behind me has a shed that's gonna be taller than this building. So he says, come in here, show your support for this change, and then that may give you the opportunity to try to get a variance. He also said to me, I instruct my people in the planning department to have people get a preliminary site plan approved. Had I been told that, I sure in hell would have. I'm not interested in throwing away 50 grand or having a $50,000 pile of steel in my backyard, which is probably going to be a hell of a lot more unsightly than this building will be. We didn't like the color of our house and been going to paint it for a long time. I just spent $7,000 painting the house to match the building. I just spent about $6,500 putting in a 6-foot massive retaining wall in the back. That retaining is so I could cut out and put this building. That retaining wall weighs 144,000 pounds. I put in overkill so that I had no issues whatsoever with anything happening down the road.
Sir, can you try to wrap up your comments? We're past the 3 minutes. I hate to do
Yes,
that, but
I
you're
see
past
that.
the 3 minutes, though. So,
But I wanted to get the whole scenario, so. Any questions?
we appreciate it. We'll address them here in a minute. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Brennan Montoya. Basically, dang it, I forgot what I was gonna say. Basically, I'm here because basically the height requirements. I'm building a shop in my backyard. I'm kind of running into the same issue he's running through. My yard's sloped. I've already bought the building. It's sitting on my side yard, along with all the siding, and I've constructed it. Got the permits and everything. Poured the footings, poured the foundation. Got a stop work order less than 24 hours before I poured. And a lot of it comes down to the permits were approved. The assistant building official knew when the elevation we talked on the phone. I submitted all the documents requested. Elevation was not part of that when I submitted all the documents. Also on March 31st, someone took a drone footage of my house showing that there's a slope in the yard, and they claimed that they didn't know the slope in the yard. Prior to that, and that was before I even got all my permits. I was just kind of digging my footings, and I was allowed to dig the footings from what Lon told me. The RV garage kit is already paid for and sitting on the side of my house, and if I was told the correct information in the first place, I wouldn't be sitting here, basically trying to explain why that the building height should be raised, and the variance between the high and the low should be kind of the variance in your land. Because at the all said and done, my building, my shop is actually 17'6" at the front, but over the total height between the high and low, my yard, it comes out to like 19 foot, so I'm 4 feet over. So now I gotta cut 4 feet off my shop, and it's already sitting and it's already prefabbed.
How big is your shop? Sorry.
It's 28 by 45. My walls are 12 feet tall, and I added 2 feet to it because I was told that I was allowed to go to 16-foot mid-peak by the building official, and then it comes to find out that was the wrong information given. So now I'm 4 feet too high because my slope of my yard.
Gotcha.
So before it would have been built wrong in the first place, even if we would have went at the elevation pulling into and going to my garage. So I have an 8-foot wall, and then you have the 12-foot going on top of it. So right now I'm sitting about 20 grand into this shop, and I can't even finish using it or erecting it because I'm kind of a stop point right here. The concrete's $6 grand. The pump was $600, and then the form rental is $3,500 for the forms, and they came and did a stop work order less than 24 hours before that, and I basically told them I wasn't going to be out $10,000 because they told me with less than 24 hours that I had to stop working, and these forms are going to cost me $150 a day past the 2-week rental. So I don't know. My 2 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question, how far away from your property line is your proposed dwelling?
3 feet. 3 feet from the back, and my yard tapers, so it's 3 feet in the back corner, and then when you get to the front of the shop, it's 6 feet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So, anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Montoya. Yep, thank you. Did you get a first name, Wendy?
We need your first
Can
name.
you, I don't think we got your first name. Brendan.
Thank you.
Zach Bevan. I've actually been here a few years ago when Craig Evans was here. You guys might have seen this picture. I have a unique or a special unique lot or whatever. But I have this lot, and I'm looking to build a garage here.
We talk about yours all the time.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get this built. So
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess the verbiage that's holding me up is
Maybe the front of
you
your
can't
house.
build a shop in front of your house, which is
Not in front of
considered
your
in
house.
front of your whole property line. So this garage is in front of my house, but not really. So Michael's been out there. He actually kind of saw it, and I mean, you can see on this other picture, it's kind of tucked way behind the street.
That's
Like
been a
nobody'd ever
nuisance to
see
your
it.
neighbors.
So.
I know we use yours very often every time we talk about
Yeah,
accessory buildings. So.
Can we look at those pictures?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should probably keep them as part of the public record too.
If you're okay with that.
Absolutely, yeah. The red line represents the front property line.
Thank you, I'll just pass them down the line.
No, yeah, we've talked about your property a lot.
What's that?
So we've talked about your property a lot already.
Yeah, it's been, I think, 2018.
Example.
I think we all know where you live. So
You all been there?
We've all driven by there, yeah. We've all
you.
driven by, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, if you could just state your name for the record. Yep, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sherry Atkinson, and I am here to share some thoughts with you from my understanding about this. May I begin with saying that as the Independence Day holiday approaches, I am very grateful to be part of a city, a state, and a nation where my voice can be heard, and I hope that my statement is met with openness and consideration on the part of you, the Planning Commission. From my understanding, the Planning Commission is considering changing the way accessory structure height is measured. The change of measuring to midpoint instead of ridge line would enable accessory structures to be built higher than the current city code of 16 feet. As the Planning Commission contemplates this change, we hope that they are considerate of the many facets of this change. First and foremost, we must look into why the change is being considered. The choice between measuring a structure to midpoint or ridge point is merely a choice of vocabulary and definition. However, using the word midpoint is confusing for the layman and may result in varying issues throughout future builds. Second, we need to look into the use of the accessory structures. I was told that we live in an area where people like their toys, and Harriman allows on-site storage of these toys. Is the height decision being made in the best interest of the general population? According to a 2021 report from thewanderingRV.com, only 3% of the nation's population own RVs, and while Utah promotes outdoor recreation, it ranks 30th among the other states in RV sales. Additionally, the largest Class A RV has a height range of 13 to 14 feet, with different classes falling much lower in height. The type that sells the most is Class B, which is 7 to 9 feet, and is projected to outsell both Class A and Class C combined. Therefore, given these numbers, we can presume that the Harriman residents are less likely to own a Class A RV. Therefore, I encourage the Planning Committee to act responsibly in deciding to amend accessory structure architectural standards. Not researched is the use of an accessory building on residential properties to house and run small businesses. If such a use is not permitted, then what is the drive behind raising the height? And if such use is allowed, additional research is needed to determine if and what will be regulated. Third, we can compare Harriman's code to that of surrounding cities. The municipal code for building heights was researched using Harriman, South Jordan, Riverton, Bluffdale, and all city had codes regarding the size, height, and setback, and all but one had requirements regarding exterior materials. The city requirements are as follows. Harriman was 16 feet in height with a setback of 3 feet or 5 feet with no firewall. Exterior materials just must match the dwelling. South Jordan does allow a height of 25 feet, but they do have the 3-foot setback. However, they require an additional foot for every foot over 16 feet. They did not dictate what exterior materials could be used. Riverton has a height of 20 feet with a lot size exception allowing up to 25 feet. They do have a minimum setback of 5 feet, but with anything over 20 feet, that bumps it up to 15 feet in setback. The exterior materials do have to match the housing structure, and they do list specific materials, including corrugated metal, that are not allowed as an exterior finish. Bluffdale does allow 18 feet, but their minimum is a 10-foot setback. While Harriman does have the most restrictive height requirement, it also has the most negligible setback. And as stated earlier, the height is only one aspect of an accessory structure, and changing the requirements can and should change the conditions for the other elements, such as setbacks and materials. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we need to consider the impact on all Harriman residents. Residents living as neighbors to these structures can be affected environmentally and economically during and after construction. Runoff collected by accessory structures and deposited into surrounding areas also changes landscaping and other uses for the neighbors. And finally, home prices can be affected by such accessory structures. Calling multiple home appraisers, we were told that large structures along neighboring property lines that clearly obstruct views could drop a home price as much as 5 to 15%, and in extreme cases, as high as 25%. Unfortunately, allowing a greater maximum height for such small percentage of Class A recreational vehicle owners can drop home prices for other residents, resulting in an economic impact on new and existing residents. As the building height requirement is being recommended or considered for change, we ask that the city sincerely consider all aspects of such a change. For example, as the height of an accessory structure increases, so should the setback. Additionally, the accessory structure material should match that of the housing structure. If the change moves forward, we again ask that the other changes to the municipal code for accessory structures are simultaneously enacted to ensure all resident safety and well-being. That is the end of what I had prepared. However, we also would like to mention.
If you could hurry and wrap it up, you're past time, so
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's fine.
I'm
We'll
sorry.
end there.
Okay.
No, that's okay, because that is what I had prepared. Thank you
Perfect.
so
Thank
much. I
you.
appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Chad Danzy. I live in 7005 West Harriman Highway. I'm actually here on something else, but on this issue, I do have a concern just because I live in an agricultural area, and in the past, I have had to come before the city council a couple times where Planning Commission has put things forward, and they weren't thinking about agricultural areas. For example, on this issue, one thing I'm thinking about that is a concern for me is pole barns, for example. As long as agricultural areas are exempted from this, I would much rather see a large pole barn to store hay than 7 or 10 small barns. And so I think whenever you make these decisions, you really have to think about them and make sure that they are appropriate. Maybe a large building isn't appropriate on a smaller lot, but make sure that you don't make laws that do affect larger areas such as agricultural or industrial areas, things like that, because that can have a big effect, and then we have to go back and fix these issues later on. So that's about all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to, but Teddy Hodges, I see that the code or the governance is only one issue of tonight's conversation. Implementation or understanding of that from staff and residents is also, as there's two individuals here that are spending numerous amounts of money to be in compliance, having permits and plans and drawn up, and then getting misinformation or improper information from staff where they're spending this money in lieu of that, and then code compliance comes by and shuts them down. I personally haven't been affected by that, nor do I plan on building a structure like this anytime soon. So although we can write it on paper, educating and learning from that, not only as staff but citizens, to make it clear and concise, where we can open up that code restriction or governance of the city and say, okay, I understand this. It's in layman terms. Like materials like your house or structure, that's very ambiguous. Is it paint? Is it stucco? Is it metal clad siding? All that. Also in with those metal container units, similar code or similar reference to actual like materials. I hate to see citizens spend money and have it iron rotting and rusting on the ground rather than standing vertical. And then it also makes it for the neighbors to understand it as well, because they're not going through the process, but if they can open that code book and say, oh, he's in his right, that'll lessen phone calls and other issues that we'll face later down the road. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teddy. Any other comments, Wendy, online or anything? Okay. At this point, should we close the public hearing? At this point, we'll close the public hearing. I'll turn to the commission for more discussion and comments.
So, for me, I still think we have a ways to go. And the reason why I say that is because I think we're covering a variety of spectrums. I think you have we'll call it the very small attached accessory to the middle size. I would call the very small is just holding your lawnmower and things like that. Then you have the middle size, which I still think doesn't even hold the RVs and toys, but it's a little bit bigger. I'll call what I have as the middle size. I have a 20 just under 200 square feet to size space. And it's 199.98. If anyone wants to measure, I can prove it. So what I'm saying is, I think there's that range, and then there's the large ones, and I think we need to break those up and evaluate those. I personally think the medium and small should be closer to the property lines and be allowed to even be closer to the houses. You're getting those anyway. You get you can buy the little plastic sheds that you throw up next to your house, and I think it's okay. And I think we need to be more flexible, and I think our code currently is too restrictive in some areas. Now, yes, on the larger ones, and that's why I was asking all the people that were talking on the larger ones, those are different, and they do make sense in their own aspects. The height, I haven't honestly thought about, to be straight up, and I appreciate you pointing that out, from all perspectives. And so that's where I really think we need to really take a look at dialing that in and then fitting that in. So like we all know you can't take the middle or larger size and put those on our 6,000 square foot lot homes.
Right.
And we have to deal with from what's the smallest lot in Harriman, 3,000 square feet, 3,500 square feet, up to 5 acres ish or bigger. And so I think we need to really kind of bucket those and give staff a little bit of, I really think we need to start letting people do more with their property. And I think having even hard, rigid lines that makes people not do what they should do, which these types of uses get rid of people's crap. I don't mean that rude because mine stores my own crap. And it makes it so that neighbors can coexist and be happy. But I do think we are too strict in some areas, too weak in some areas. I do think we still need to have it match like this structure, and I agree we need to define that more. but I think it needs to a certain extent. And again, I'll say the medium ones are probably the ones that should match the structure. The small ones are the ones that are plastic, and the large ones are the ones that are just customized and they're different. And so I do think we need to think through this a little bit more and really focus on setbacks and where it makes sense, like the corner lot or I don't even know what you'd call your lot, but the T-lot thing, that one makes sense. We all know that one makes sense.
Right.
And I don't know why we have to have it even go for a variance. We need to adjust what we interpret and be more clear and maybe diagram on a lot like this, and we could use yours as an example. We define what we mean by frontage, because in that lot, I know we would have never thought that side was the front.
Well, I think that's what I like about what you guys are proposing too. There's like a conditional, they can come before us and say, hey, look at my situation. This is not intent. We're still meeting intent, even though it doesn't meet the exact ordinance.
But Brody, what I'm actually saying is I think we need to not have to have everybody, like when you buy a house, you have your plans for your garage. You start thinking while you're investigating this home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they should have to plan and call and research. I think it should be more clear. We still have a provision to to mitigate if it doesn't fit. But I'm saying on every one of these cases, I think it should have been written down clearly I like how you've done the table, but a much more clear delineation of those three types by the zones. Like I said, the small, medium, and large, because they're just different, and you can't lump them all together. And that's the problem is, for the longest time, we were focused on the small ones, and we were forgetting stuff.
In residential, yeah.
And one I saw recently, and a lot of you haven't been on as long as I have with the chicken discussions that took 4 years of my life away, that we talked about chickens forever, and right now it says you can't have a chicken coop, an animal, within 43 of your house, 43 feet of your house. That's not realistic. We know there's chicken coops next to people's homes, beehives. I mean, that's people, I think we need to not restrict so much. And I think we've kind of I think we react, and we need to open up where it makes sense. I still want to think about the height thing.
I like the varied setbacks depending on height.
That's what I'm trying to say is the small, medium, large setbacks by different zones. And we basically exclude large in certain zones and even medium to that extent.
Well, even the height by zone maybe makes sense. The gentleman with the pole barn, if it's purely agricultural use and sizable enough to warrant the harvesting of hay, a pole barn makes sense.
Agreed, and that's what I've noticed is if you don't, and I liked his point about saying if garages can be, or sheds and accessory buildings can be big enough to house what the people want, you don't get 5 little ones. Right. And I have a bunch of neighbors that have done the 5 little ones, and they're right next to each other.
I've seen that too.
Next to the house. And I know we're trying to go with fire code. I get that, but I think that's the big, yes, if you're going to build I'm sorry, I can't remember what your gentleman's name, but what was it, 40-foot by 30-foot garage? 28 by 45, that I would consider large. That should be farther than 6 feet away from the house, because it's not gonna feel the same.
Well,
But
then you go with
medium,
grading too.
like a 200 square foot or 400 square foot garage, or shed, it's gonna look like a garage. So why not put it closer to the house anyway? I'm just saying we should think about those different things, and I hate to do this to staff because I know you've done a lot of work, but I think we need to think through that a little bit more and try and discuss that in that spectrum, because I know we always think of this, for a long time we were talking the small ones, and then we were talking the large ones, and I think we need to open that up a little bit more and remove a lot of our standards. I really think we're too restrictive. Because my shed, like I said, was back when we had 1 foot. And I still think with my shed, if anybody went and saw it, they'd go, oh, that 1 foot makes sense there, and because of the size of my shed. But I don't have a 28 by 40 foot shed. And that one does make sense to be farther apart. And I think I still struggle with the 3 foot setback, because I think it needs to either be small or big. If it's 3 feet, it becomes trash around said accessory building.
and you get vermin, and I would rather have some of my neighbor's fence and shed right next to my property line, because then I don't have trash and vermin in that 3-foot setback. So I actually think it should be really close or really far.
Yeah, I like your idea about the matrix where we divide them up into small, medium, large, and then we talk about setbacks depending on
Those
size
types of-
and acreage too. Because it's like if you have an acre, you have a pole barn. Like, I mean, it's a little tricky because some of these people here before us today, like grading of their yard is, we would say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. You're not a nuisance to any of your neighbors because you're set down below everybody else's house or things of that nature. That's why I like the conditional use where they can come and say, my situation's unique, but then, like you said, we don't need to say everybody's. If they say, I meet the large setbacks, and I feel like we should do a step. If it's like medium large, you know, you have to step 2 feet away because you went X amount
go
high.
higher.
Yeah.
As long as you don't make them subjective, and I think this gentleman was saying that's part of the problem is the codes, the ordinances, they're kind of gray. So you need to really define if you're going to go with 3 different sizes.
What we mean.
Yeah.
We say square footage is X, right?
Correct. And
Then
that's
they
what
can-
I'm trying
they
to
can
say.
do
is
whatever they want that way.
I'm trying to give staff the small, medium, large. They fill in the square footage that makes sense based off the comments and questions that they've been hearing.
So that's the question. So just to rewind, just to clarify a couple of things, there was a comment made about the city changing from the height measurement from the
Mid.
top to the midpoint.
to the
That's not
ridge,
the
yeah.
proposal. The proposal is basically keeping all the requirements as they are and providing a special exception option for other types of uses. That being said, so going back to what Commissioner Jacobson is talking about, so having these 3, small, medium, large classifications, I think that we would want some guidance as a staff as what do you determine. So anything under 200 square feet does not require a building permit. It is still subject to, it still could be subject to setback regulations and those types of things. Currently, in the ordinance that we're proposing tonight, if it's anything less than 80 square feet, you can put it right up against the building and a foot away from the property line. But in terms of assessing what is, if it requires a building permit, if it's over 200 square feet, is that considered large? Or at what point is medium to large? If you can help maybe delineate that a little bit more.
I was thinking of this why I was thinking what I meant by small, medium, large, and I would say small is probably up to like 100 square feet. It's probably
10
what
by
I was
10.
thinking. A 10 by 10, something you can just buy at Costco when you go get your plastic shed, because it's going to be different. Then I think from 100 to probably a 20 by 20, a 400 square foot is probably your medium size. And then anybody else that I wish I could have that much property and shed because you just fill it and you put toys in it, then that's awesome, and I think that's the large. And then I still think you should have a special exception because I still think it fits. We've done these before in an agricultural area over in Old Town Harriman. It was a white shed they bought from Riverton City. It's huge. And they moved it 25 feet away from the neighborhood and actually planted a bunch of extra trees. It was a requirement we had. It ended up being overall a decent fit for everybody. And I think we should have special exceptions. But I also think we should talk about heights for small, medium, large. Because it's different. Setbacks are different.
Yeah.
And then we apply it to zones, and we can say, large doesn't fit in an R2 or an R1. It fits in an agricultural. And I think it would help frame this so we all know when we're talking in the same vein, because I agree, it is
Make it
confusing.
easier for staff.
I worked for 10 years trying to figure out how to design my shed, just because it kept changing. And so I think trying to be as clear as possible so that it's not always before, because we all know at this day and age, when you buy your home, you're making such a large investment that you need to know more about what you can do on that property that day before you make that commitment. And that's why I don't want to have staff have to answer these all the time, because you can see the interpretation, whether it was who they talked to or or what they talk to. And so I think we need to really clean this up. And I'd rather take the time now than rush it through.
Yeah, if we could
That's
do
me,
a
just
working
personally.
session on it, that would be my preference.
Maybe we really dive into that in the next work session, and I'm totally fine with that.
So typically, if you're going for simplicity, you're probably also going to have, it'll be limited. You'll have more limitations, really, potentially. Because you always have to be concerned about the unintended consequences, right? I guess you could go the other
I
direction.
want to
You could
actually
have it
try and
so
pull
simple.
stuff out.
Okay.
I really am trying to say we need to pull, like, that we'll go small, 100 square foot. Anything above that, we just say, you can have a small 100 square foot building. We don't say anything. That's it. There's no problem. There's no requirements. You go to the mid-size, it needs to match your house. It needs to be a foot away from your property line. I'm just making up stuff. A foot away from the property line, which I think is a good one. And you need to be in the backyard, whatever that means by backyard, okay? Then you go to the big ones, and you need to be in the backyard. You need to have its own substantial building that fits within the community. So, I mean, maybe you differ on that, because we all know some people want to go with the big red barn just because they live out in Harriman and we have horses, right? So you give that latitude for the bigger ones, but they have a little bit more requirements that they have to fulfill. And then there's a special exception. But as far as the gentleman with the front yard that really is the side yard, we should just put that on the map saying, if you live on this kind of lot, that's the side yard. Like, I live on a corner.
But I think
I
I worry
or
about
just
orientation
don't create
of
those
their
lots.
home.
Yeah, I mean, like, I live on a corner lot. It makes no sense that if I didn't want to put in a side entrance off my corner lot and put a big giant, one of these size garage, that I should be able to do that. It's totally offset from everybody. There's no neighbors. I have a trail behind my house. And I don't think, it's almost similar to this gentleman's property. We need to allow things to happen, because then these residents, and you guys have all heard me talk about code enforcement, they're complying. The ones we need to worry about are the ones that aren't complying. So we need to allow people to do stuff on their property.
Well, and I think one area we need to talk about too is like prefabricated buildings, because most of them are metal, right? And that's not going to match like materials on their home. So I would like to talk more about that.
And maybe that's where we talk about the large discussion, and we talk about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense for the large. And so is that helpful? Was that helpful at all? Or still, still confused?
Yeah, because I think we talked about.
And I don't think this is going to be just one meeting or two meetings. I think maybe for the next little bit in the work meeting before this meeting, we should sit down and break up into and only focus about the one. So we're not trying to grab every issue with all three, and we step it through. I think that way we're all consistent and we can develop what makes sense. But that's just
Yeah, I like, okay, address zoning, right? We go through the zoning and say, where does small, medium, large fit within our zones? And then talk about what we consider small, medium, and large. Then we talk about setbacks. And I feel like we can come to a matrix that's very clear for staff and for our residents of what they can have.
I mean, we have a bunch of new homes that people can't even fit on their driveway. We need to open up this kind of stuff, to be honest.
If you
Funny how
do
things
all that,
repeat
you need to
themselves.
throw in the height.
Oh, go ahead.
If we do all that, you need to throw in the discussion about height.
Yeah.
Utah's an outdoor state. Every other neighbor has a
RV.
And they're all 12, 14 foot tall. So if it's 16 foot to mid, am I hearing that right?
It's 16 feet to peak.
The peak.
To peak.
You're going to have a
You're gonna have
flat
a good
slope
fit,
roof
yeah.
to put an RV in a garage.
Which I think is its own discussion with your setbacks, right? If we started, and like I said, I'm just making up stuff. You started with 1 foot, and that was, you can have up to 16 feet. Okay. But then if you slide over 12 feet into your own property, then maybe we allow you to go up higher. And that's what I'm trying to say is if we broke it up into those small, medium, large, I think we could look at each of the, not only the zoning issues, but each of the type of issues and make it so it's more of a simple table. My goal is 1 page of table, that's all. None of these like 50 other clauses and stuff.
If we do like 2-point, I think we can fit everything on one.
2-point?
Yeah, 2-point, we can fit everything on one
No,
page.
I actually think we need to remove a lot of our stuff, what I'm saying. But we need to make it so people can do what they want to do with their property.
This is
Because these kind of homes are what have a very limited amount of homes. It's the small homes that we have a lot of now.
But I was going to say, this is something that, it's funny how things repeat, we've looked at, well, and just from my experience, some of the things we did in Ogden before I came here, we looked at multifamily design guidelines. Another thing was I revised our accessory building ordinance. So I'm glad to bring those to our commission, kind of present what we addressed in Ogden. Not that it necessarily has to apply to Harriman, but to give maybe some ideas. I'd be glad to do that. But if that's if that's the sentiment from the rest of the commission to continue this, we can of course.
Again, that's just me, so I don't know how you.
Well, and I think slope, I think two of the gentlemen that spoke tonight the slope became a factor too of the yard. I don't know how you address slope, but that's.
It's an average.
Yeah.
There was one thing in there that I wanted to mention that we're restricting is I think we should be allowed to have kitchens in these. And I know that we don't want people living in them and we're not allowing that, but if I have a pool and I want to build like a little kitchen in there in my accessory, then I don't really see a problem with that. I don't think we should be restrictive on things like that.
Usually though, the kitchens are what define a dwelling unit. It's not a living space, but it's actually the kitchen elements.
Yeah, but you
can refine that and say, if there's no oven, then that's not a dwelling unit.
It even says it in our code that we can't even have a kitchen in our basement.
Right.
So for me, we're gonna have to look at that for our other ordinance that we were talking about. I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Again, I think we should just pull it down to square footage, let people do what they need to do. And honestly, I don't know why we need to. I don't know why we need to care if someone wants to put in a kitchen next to their swimming pool outside. I hope that's my neighbor.
Yep.
To be honest, that is awesome. That means they're going to take care of their yard.
Or if they want a nice shop, they can do what they want inside of it.
Exactly. I would rather have them cutting and doing work inside of a shop than out on the side of their RV pad. They're going to do it either way. We should allow for some flexibility.
Well, I think you got to bring what you did in Ogden. I think that'd be great. Michael, I saw a couple of concerned looks from you as well. I'd like to hear your concerns on this too. So should we continue it? And are we okay with that, staff? Staff okay with that?
So I'd like to make a motion to continue item 5.3 without date, so we can talk about it for a very long time and get it done right.
Well, except for these people that want to get.
I was gonna say,
I
how does that
apologize. We'll get
affect?
it done quickly.
We'll do our best to.
Unfortunately,
Hold
you
on,
can't
yeah, we
because we
can't,
closed the
unfortunately,
meeting. I'm sorry.
Talk to one of the staff after. I think we can. Yeah.
So you made a motion?
Yes, I
I'll
did.
second
Remember,
that.
this will be continued, so there'll be more discussion. We'll bring it up, please. So, okay. Motion by Adam, second by Heather.
Yep.
Adam?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
So that item will be continued without date?
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, we move on to item 6. Any chair or commission comments at this point?
I think tonight we heard some things that definitely need to be addressed in planning. I think maybe we need to have like a book put together, just like if someone calls and says, hey, I want to build a shed, maybe just have like something for them to go off of rather than, oh, it just has to look like something. So I don't know if that's something that.
This is what a deck looks like. This is what a shed looks
Yeah,
like.
I
Like
think
a shed
that
101.
it definitely needs to be more specific because I don't think that we're doing a good job communicating what we're requiring for our residents if they're calling and saying, hey, I want to build this shed. And we're like, oh, well, you just need this and this. And then we have a building inspector going out and saying, oh, you don't need to follow our ordinance. That's super frustrating to me, especially because I have so many concerns about our building inspectors and having them go out and people are getting occupancy when things that were supposed to be done haven't been done. So I'm frustrated with those comments that. those
Well,
aren't being.
I agree with you, and I think that, you know, one of my concerns with the, has to be like, you know, what if you want to try a different architectural style for your secondary building? You wanted a more modern, you know, looking style versus your craftsman that's up front. You wouldn't be allowed to, right? Because you're not going to have the same textures, you're not going to have the same, I mean, you might have same colors, but, so I think, I understand the approach. The approach of the ordinance was to say, we don't want you to put something up that looks terrible and is just, you know, yeah, that's an eyesore. And so, but to clarify it, you know, to make it easier for people to make something that does look nice. You know, if I buy a modern home, I would never buy a modern home, but if I were to buy a modern home, you know, and if I was going to build my own shop in the back or whatever, I would not build a modern shop, you know.
I get your point there. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that we'll have to consider in future discussions, because I think what we're trying to say is if your house is made out of brick, we want you to have like equal stone or something that's kind of comparable. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
Honestly, when we even did it, I remember we were basically trying to say, try and make the colors match.
Right.
That's honestly, I mean, this didn't exist that long ago. I think this was about 7 years ago we did this, or 6 years ago. We were just trying to get some guidelines so you didn't have a blue shed, bright blue shed next to your tan home.
Exactly.
But again, we don't enforce that, so it doesn't matter, right?
Well, and that's just clarifying the code. That's just like, you know, simple, making our intentions even more apparent.
Correct.
Because, yeah, Costco's not going to sell anything that looks like your house.
Yep.
Sorry.
Totally agree.
Okay, any other comments or anything?
Nope.
Michael?
Thank you so much for your comments. And you know, we're trying to draft an ordinance that you as residents of this city, you know, you kind of, you typify, you represent hundreds and literally thousands of residents behind you. You know, we're just trying to figure out what works for this community and for you. This is not something that's, you know, meeting really our needs or our standards or what we think makes for a good city necessarily. I mean, yes, we will advise, we will recommend, but we really appreciate your feedback. And it is a balance. It is so hard to figure out where is individual property rights versus the community. I mean, I'm hearing we want to let people do what they want with their property, but even so, you still have a limit. You don't want to have clashing colors. You don't want to create a conflict for a neighbor. You don't want to harm property values. You know, so where is that line between the greater community benefits or impacts and private property rights and personal freedom?
Yeah. And this does apply also to that new House bill in a way, right? If we can't restrict what the house looks like, then the shed might be something we don't, like I said, maybe we drop that.
Maybe we get rid of that. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not 100% sold on maybe that's the wrong approach.
But then we can't regulate metal sheds, you know, shipping containers.
Don't give them any ideas. Don't give.
So then, so I have a question. So where does it leave these two cases?
Yeah,
couldn't they do a conditional use? That's what I was going to ask. I mean, isn't there a solution for them in the? There's no.
No, that's
Is it because of the zone that they're happening to
can they
be
get a
in?
variance?
Is that what it is? Because we did the variant. I can give you the file number. It was back in 20.
Oh gosh.
It was the Skinny. If you look up Skinner property off of 5700 West, that we did a variance. Now maybe it was because it was an 8.25 zone or something, but we did a variance there, as we also did one up in Old Harriman.
Is it a variance?
It's a Butterfield, I can't remember.
So variance is a very specific legal term that would not go to the planning commission. It would go to a board of adjustment.
I'm saying we had two of these kind of big barn type things that came in those areas.
So, and maybe there was another tool that predated the current zoning tool that we have right now. But you know, this was a young, fast-growing community, and I will tell you, I've seen a number of things that happened where I asked staff, how did we do that? Because when I look at the code, I don't see where that was allowed. It wasn't really an option, but we just kind of did it.
So look for Skinner and
Okay,
Butterfield. Skinner and
look,
Butterfield. I know that we did
it-
those.
It's very possible that was a tool in the previous ordinance.
I don't remember how they did it, but I remember talking about it for like 4 meetings.
Okay.
so.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the public comment tonight, those of you that came out, and appreciate your input tonight. We do take it serious and take it into account. We appreciate it. So, and those that also chimed in online or through email. So, at this point, I'll make a motion.
Motion to
accept the
adjourn.
Motion by Adam.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Here we go. We are adjourned.
My daughter wants to be an architect.
Skinner
I was like, really, you drew on my notes?
We're in the old building.